The ground had stopped shaking, but the dust hadn't settled. Elian Voss adjusted his respirator and swept his light across the crumbled remains of what had once been Outpost Helios, the colony's most advanced research facility. 3 days after the quake had torn Meridian 9 apart, hope of finding survivors was fading like the planet's twin suns on the horizon. Sector 8 clear, he reported into his comm. Static answered him. The relay towers were down across half the continent, leaving rescue teams isolated. Elian checked his oxygen levels, 4 hours remaining, and pushed deeper into the rubble. Something caught his attention. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration. He froze, focusing his senses. There it was again, a faint rhythmic pulse that seemed to resonate through the metal beneath his feet. Following the sensation, he began shifting debris, his augmented exoframe making the work possible. "Hello?" he called, knowing his translator would convert his words to the various languages used by the colonists. "Anyone alive down there?" The pulse quickened in response. After 20 minutes of careful excavation, Elian uncovered a small pocket in the wreckage. His light fell upon a sight that stole his breath away. A child no more than 6 by human standards curled protectively around a small crystal. But this was no human child. Her skin was a pale lavender that seemed to shimmer with subtle bioluminescence. Where the dust had settled on her, it glowed faintly. "Hey there," he whispered, deactivating his respirator so she could see his face. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The child uncurled slightly, revealing large, irisless eyes that reflected his light like pools of liquid amethyst. She had no visible nose, just small ridges, and her mouth was surprisingly human-like. The similarities ended there. Delicate, translucent membranes extended from her temples, quivering with what Elian recognized as fear. He knew of the Lumini. Everyone on Meridian 9 did, but few colonists had ever seen one. They kept to themselves in the distant crystal valleys, avoiding human settlements since the breach 20 years earlier. When Elian reached toward her, she shrank back. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand him. Instead, he opened his pack and offered her water. After a hesitant moment, she accepted it, drinking greedily. As she drank, Elian assessed her condition. No visible injuries, but her luminescence pulsed weakly. She needed medical attention, the kind he couldn't provide. She finished the water and looked up at him. Then, to his astonishment, she reached out and placed her small hand against his chest. An electric tingle spread through him, followed by a sensation he couldn't describe, like thoughts forming directly in his mind, bypassing language entirely. "Home, take, please." The impression faded, leaving Elian stunned. The stories were true. The Lumini could project emotions, simple concepts. And this child, lost and afraid, wanted to go home. The logical course would be to take her to Colony Hub for processing. Protocol for encountering indigenous species was clear, but Elian had seen what happened at processing centers. Endless questioning, invasive examinations. This child would become a research subject just like the Lumini who'd been captured during the breach. "I'll take you home," he found himself saying, the decision forming even as the words left his mouth. "I promise." She seemed to understand, clutching her crystal tighter. Night was falling as Elian emerged from the ruins with the child wrapped in his emergency blanket. The rescue coordinator Santos approached with a tablet in hand. "Find anyone?" he asked wearily. Elian hesitated. "No, this sector's clear." Santos nodded, already turning away. "Head back to base. We're pulling out tomorrow. Not enough resources to continue." When Santos was gone, Elian looked down at the child who watched him with those luminous eyes. The crystal valleys were at least 10 days' journey on foot, across terrain made treacherous by the quake. Colonial authorities would never approve such a mission. "I guess it's just you and me," he murmured. "I don't even know your name." She touched his chest again, and this time the impression was clearer. "Mira." "Mira," he repeated. "I'm Elian, and I'm going to carry you home, no matter how far." Dawn broke over the fractured landscape of Meridian 9, casting long shadows across terrain that had been transformed overnight by the quake. Elian checked his pack one final time. Emergency rations, water purifiers, medical supplies, and a plasma rifle he hoped he wouldn't need to use. The settlement's eastern gate stood unguarded. Most security personnel had been deployed to manage the disaster zones. "Ready to go, Mira?" he whispered. The small purple figure nodded, her luminescent patterns pulsing gently beneath the oversized survival jacket he'd given her. She clutched her crystal tightly, never letting it out of her grasp. They slipped away as the colony stirred to life, following the old supply route that would take them east toward the distant mountains where the crystal valleys lay hidden. Elian had only rough coordinates based on rumors and outdated survey maps, but it was better than nothing. By midday, the rugged plains gave way to a forest of twisted, metallic-looking trees, native vegetation that had adapted to Meridian 9's mineral-rich soil. The canopy provided cover from aerial surveillance, but the dense undergrowth slowed their progress. "We'll rest here," Elian said, finding a small clearing beside a stream. Mira approached the water cautiously, dipping her fingers in before quickly withdrawing them. The liquid briefly glowed where she touched it. "Is it safe for you?" Elian asked, forgetting momentarily that she couldn't understand his words. To his surprise, Mira nodded. She placed her hand against his arm, sending a clear impression. Yes, different, but good. Her communication abilities were growing stronger. Perhaps it was trust or simply recovery from her ordeal. As Mira sipped water cupped in her hands, Elian studied his navigation unit. They'd covered less ground than he'd hoped. At this rate, the journey would take 2 weeks, not 10 days. His supplies wouldn't last that long. A sound from Mira drew his attention. She was attempting to eat one of the ration bars, her face contorted in what he interpreted as disgust. Elian laughed softly. "Yeah, they're pretty terrible." He rummaged through his pack and found a nutrient gel pack, bland but easier to consume. "Try this instead." Mira accepted it gratefully, the membranes at her temples fluttering in what Elian was beginning to recognize as contentment. As she ate, Elian noticed how the light played across her features. Despite her alien appearance, there was something undeniably childlike in her expressions. He wondered about her family, waiting somewhere in those distant valleys. Were they searching for her? Did they think she was dead? His thoughts were interrupted by a subtle change in the forest's ambient sounds. The native insects had gone quiet. Elian reached slowly for his rifle. "Mira," he whispered. "We need to hide." Before they could move, 3 figures emerged from the tree line. Human raiders, their faces obscured by makeshift masks, weapons trained on Elian and Mira. "Well, what have we got here?" The tallest one drawled. "A company man," and his eyes widened behind his mask. "Is that what I think it is?" Elian shifted, placing himself between the raiders and Mira. "We're just passing through. We don't want trouble." "That little purple thing will fetch a fortune on the right market," said another raider, a woman with a jagged scar across her neck. "Step aside." "That's not happening." Elian's finger hovered near the trigger of his rifle. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Then Mira did something unexpected. She stepped forward, raised her crystal, and a blinding flash of light erupted. The raiders staggered back, temporarily blinded. "Run!" Elian scooped Mira into his arms and bolted deeper into the forest. The sound of pursuit followed them for what seemed like hours. Elian's exoframe gave him an advantage, allowing him to leap over fallen trees and navigate difficult terrain while carrying Mira. Eventually, the sounds faded, and they took shelter in a cave formed by massive, uprooted trees. Night fell. Elian didn't dare light a fire. Instead, they huddled together for warmth, Mira's natural glow providing just enough light to see her face. "That was quite a trick with the crystal," Elian whispered. Mira touched his face gently. "Protect friend," came the impression. "Friend, huh?" Elian smiled. "I guess we are." As Mira drifted to sleep against his chest, Elian remained vigilant. Unknown to him, they were being watched, not by raiders, but by a figure perched high in the twisted trees. The observer's skin glowed with patterns similar to Mira's, but more complex, more controlled. Niara, warrior scout of the Lumini, had found the child she'd been sent to recover, but the human companion was unexpected. She would watch them a while longer before deciding his fate. 3 days into their journey, the terrain grew increasingly difficult. The quake had torn chasms across once navigable paths, forcing Elian and Mira to make treacherous detours. They'd managed to avoid further encounters with raiders, but Elian's navigation unit warned of an approaching storm front, atmospheric disturbances common on Meridian 9, capable of lasting for days. "We need better shelter," Elian told Mira as they trudged along a ridge overlooking a vast, fog-filled valley. Mira had been unusually quiet since morning, her luminescence dimmed. When Elian knelt to check on her, she placed a trembling hand against his cheek. Sick. Need. Home. Elian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind picking up around them. Are you ill? What's wrong? But Mira couldn't convey the complexity of her condition. She simply touched her crystal, then pointed toward the distant mountains partially obscured by clouds. We'll get there, Elian promised. Just stay with me. As the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, Elian spotted what appeared to be an abandoned outpost nestled against the hillside below, a remnant from the early colonization efforts. He carried Mira down the slope, her small body feeling lighter than it had days earlier. That couldn't be good. The outpost's door was jammed. Elian set Mira down in the minimal shelter of an overhanging rock and began forcing the door open with tools from his pack. The rain intensified, bringing with it sharp, stinging particles from the atmosphere, a chemical reaction unique to Meridian 9 storms. Just as the door gave way, Elian heard a sound behind him, a low melodic hum that wasn't human. He spun around to see a tall figure standing over Mira, a Lumini adult with deeper purple skin adorned with intricate, glowing patterns. Unlike Mira's childlike features, this Lumini's face was angular, fierce. In one hand, she held what appeared to be a weapon, a crystalline spear that hummed with energy. Step away from the child, the Lumini said, her voice surprisingly clear in Elian's mind. Elian raised his hand slowly. You speak, not with sound, in thoughts. It is how we learn your languages. Her patterns flickered rapidly. I am Niara, warrior scout of the Eastern Realm. That child belongs with her people. I'm taking her home, Elian said. That's been my plan all along. Niara's luminescent patterns intensified with skepticism. Humans do not return what they take. Mira stirred, reaching weakly toward Niara. The warrior immediately knelt beside her, placing her hands on either side of Mira's face. Their patterns synchronized briefly. She is in phase shift, Niara said, alarm evident in her mental voice, too long away from the resonance fields. She looked up at Elian, her expression unreadable to human eyes. She needs crystal immersion or she will fade. I don't understand. No, you would not. Niara gathered Mira into her arms. Our children cannot survive long outside our valleys. The resonance of the crystal formation sustains their developing light channels. She hesitated, then added, She says you promised to take her home, that you have been kind. I meant it, Elian said. Please let me help. I have medical supplies, shelter. The storm intensified around them. A particularly violent gust nearly knocked Niara off balance. Elian instinctively reached out to steady her, his hand gripping her arm. The contact sent an unexpected surge of sensation through him, like an electric current but warm, almost pleasant. Niara jerked away, her patterns flaring. She seemed as startled by the connection as he was. The shelter, Elian said, nodding toward the open door. Please, the storm is getting worse. After a moment's hesitation, Niara carried Mira into the abandoned outpost. Elian followed, sealing the door behind them. The interior was dusty but intact. A single room with basic furnishings left by whoever had once manned the station. Niara laid Mira on a cot and removed a small container from a pouch at her waist. Inside was a luminous paste which she carefully applied to Mira's temples and chest. This will stabilize her temporarily, Niara explained. But she needs the valleys. How far are we? Elian asked. 4 days' journey for a Lumini, longer for a human. Then we'll leave as soon as the storm passes. Niara studied him, her head tilted slightly. We? Yes, we. I made a promise to Mira. I intend to keep it. The intensity of Niara's gaze made Elian uncomfortably aware of himself, his disheveled appearance, the grime of days of travel, the exhaustion he'd been fighting. You risk much for a child not of your kind, she finally said. Elian shrugged. Wouldn't you? For the first time, Niara's patterns shifted into what might have been the equivalent of a smile. Perhaps humans have changed since the breach. Some of us have tried, Elian replied quietly. As the storm raged outside, an uneasy alliance formed within the shelter of the outpost. Elian prepared a meal from his rations while Niara tended to Mira, whose condition stabilized under her care. That night, as Mira slept, Elian found himself studying Niara in the dim light of her bioluminescence. There was a grace to her movements, a fluid precision that fascinated him. When she caught him watching, he didn't look away. "Your kind fears us," she said into his mind. "Yet you do not." "I've never understood fear of difference," Elian replied. "There's too much to learn." Nyara's patterns rippled in what might have been amusement. "A dangerous curiosity, is it?" Elian asked, holding her gaze. Neither spoke again that night, but something had shifted between them, a bridge beginning to form across an ancient divide. The storm passed after 2 days of confinement in the outpost. During that time, a cautious routine had developed, Elian maintaining their shelter and supplies while Nyara tended to Mira, whose condition remained stable but fragile. The forced proximity had worn away some of their initial wariness, replaced by a grudging respect. As they prepared to leave, Elian noticed Nyara studying his exoframe with undisguised interest. "Your technology," she said, her mental voice resonating in his mind. "It enhances your natural strength?" Elian nodded. "Makes it possible to carry heavy loads, or in this case, travel difficult terrain while carrying Mira if needed." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to see how it works?" Surprise flickered across Nyara's luminescent patterns. After a moment, she inclined her head in assent. Elian demonstrated the neural interface, explaining how the frame amplified his movements. When he invited her to touch the metallic components along his forearm, she did so with surprising delicacy. The contact sent that same warm current through him as before, but less jarring now, more like a pleasant hum beneath his skin. "You feel it too," Nyara observed, noticing his reaction. "The energy exchange. What is it?" Elian asked. "Our life force recognizes yours as compatible." Her patterns dimmed slightly as if embarrassed. "It is rare between species." Before Elian could ask what she meant, Mira awakened and their attention turned to the journey ahead. The terrain beyond the outpost gradually transformed into a landscape, unlike anything Elian had seen on Meridian 9. Crystal formations began to appear, small at first, then larger, jutting from the ground like translucent teeth. They emitted a subtle resonance that Elian felt rather than heard, a vibration that seemed to strengthen both Nyara and Mira with each passing hour. "We approached the outer boundaries," Nyara explained as they made camp that evening. "Few humans have seen this far into our realm." Mira had improved enough to explore their surroundings, her childlike wonder returning as she gathered small crystal fragments, which glowed more intensely in her hands. She brought one to Elian, pressing it into his palm with a delighted expression. "For friend," came her impression. "Thank you, Mira," Elian said, genuinely touched. As Mira played nearby, Nyara seated herself beside Elian. In the deepening twilight, her bioluminescent patterns were more pronounced, casting a soft purple glow over her features. Elian found himself tracing the intricate designs with his eyes. "You have questions," she said, not looking at him. "Many," Elian admitted. "About your people, the breach, why you've remained hidden all these years." Nyara was quiet for a long moment. "The breach was not what your people believe. It was not an attack." Her patterns shifted into somber configurations. "It was a misunderstanding of intentions." She explained how 20 years ago, a research team had discovered a Lumini settlement. Initially, contact had been peaceful, even promising. But when researchers realized the potential applications of Lumini bioluminescent technology, the ability to transfer energy and information through touch, everything changed. They wanted to study us. Some of our elders agreed, believing in cooperation, but when they began taking children for extended research, our council objected. Her mental voice grew strained. "Your people did not listen, so we created the illusion of an attack, a massive energy discharge that damaged equipment but harmed no one. It gave us time to retreat deeper into the valleys to hide ourselves better. And the colonists believed they'd been attacked." Elian finished for her. "Used it as justification for classifying your people as a potential threat." "Yes. Since then, we observe. We do not engage," she looked at him directly. "Until now." There was an intensity to her gaze that made Elian's heart beat faster. On impulse, he reached out, his fingers hovering near the glowing patterns on her arm. "May I?" he asked quietly. After a hesitation, she nodded. When his fingertips made contact with her skin, the sensation was immediate. A rush of warmth that spread up his arm and through his chest. But this time there was something more. Flashes of emotion, fragments of memory that weren't his own. He saw glimpses of the crystal valleys through her eyes, felt her fierce protectiveness toward her people, her curiosity about him. When he pulled back, breathless, Yara's patterns were pulsing rapidly. "What was that?" he whispered. "Connection," she replied simply. "My people share emotions, memories through touch. It seems you have some capacity for it as well." Before Elian could respond, Mira returned to their side, settling between them with contented exhaustion. As she drifted to sleep, Yara's hand found Elian's in the darkness, initiating another, gentler connection. That night, as Mira slept, Elian and Nyara sat beneath the alien stars, hands entwined, sharing wordless exchanges of memory and feeling that bridged the gap between their worlds more effectively than language ever could. By morning, something fundamental had changed between them, a tentative intimacy born of understanding that transcended their differences. As they journeyed deeper into Lumini territory, Elian began to notice subtle changes in himself. His senses seemed heightened, especially around the crystal formations. Occasionally, he would catch glimpses of Nyara's emotions without physical contact, brief impressions that faded quickly but left him wondering about the extent of their connection. Their final night before reaching the main settlement, they made camp in a cave lined with pulsing crystals. Mira, nearly recovered now, slept peacefully, her small body curled around her treasured crystal. Nyara led Elian deeper into the cave where the crystals grew larger, their light painting the stone walls with shifting patterns of violet and blue. "This place is sacred to us," she explained, "a chamber of truth." In the heart of the cave, she turned to face him. Without her usual reserve, she stepped closer, raising her hands to frame his face. The connection bloomed instantly, stronger than before. "I want you to understand what awaits," she said, both aloud and in his mind. "My people will not all welcome you. Some remember the breach too clearly." "I understand," Elian replied. "I'll leave once Mira is safe." Sadness rippled through Nyara's patterns. "Is that what you wish?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibility. Elian found himself moving closer, drawn by something beyond physical attraction, a recognition of something kindred despite their differences. "No," he admitted softly. "It's not what I wish." When their lips met, the connection between them expanded exponentially. The sensation was unlike anything Elian had experienced, as if their very essences intermingled. Nyara's luminescence intensified, her patterns flowing onto his skin where they touched, temporarily marking him with her light. They sank to the crystal-strewn floor, explorers of uncharted territory. Each touch brought new discoveries, the sensitive membranes at her temples that quivered beneath his fingers, the places along his neck and chest where her touch sent cascades of sensation through his nervous system. Their bodies were different yet compatible in ways neither had anticipated, finding harmony in the rhythms they created together. In the afterglow, they lay entwined, Nyara's luminescence pulsing in time with Elian's heartbeat. No words were necessary. The connection between them conveyed everything: wonder, tenderness, and the uncertainty of what awaited them beyond this moment. "What happens tomorrow?" Elian finally asked, his fingers tracing the patterns along her shoulder. "Tomorrow we reach the heart of the valleys," Nyara replied. "And my people will need to decide if one human can be trusted where others have failed." "And us? What do we become to each other?" Nyara's patterns shifted into a configuration he hadn't seen before, complex and beautiful in its intensity. "A bridge," she said simply. "Perhaps the first of many." As they returned to where Mira slept, Elian wondered if one act of kindness, the decision to carry a child home, could truly change the course of two peoples. Tomorrow would bring answers, but for tonight the possibility alone was enough. The Lumini settlement revealed itself gradually, emerging from the morning mist like a vision from another world. Crystalline structures rose from the valley floor, their surfaces catching the light and fracturing it into prismatic patterns. Smaller dwellings nestled between massive crystal formations, connected by pathways that glowed with bioluminescent markers. Mira, fully revitalized now, practically danced ahead of them, her excitement palpable. Nyara walked beside Elian, her posture increasingly tense as they approached. "Remember," she cautioned, "do not speak unless spoken to. Let me explain your presence." As they entered the settlement proper, Lumini appeared from their dwellings. They resembled Niara in their general features, though their patterns and coloration varied widely, some with deeper purple hues, others with tints of blue or magenta. All shared the same luminescent qualities, their patterns shifting and communicating in ways Elian couldn't comprehend. A murmur of mental voices washed over him, not directed at him, but awareness of their presence rippled through the community like a stone dropped in still water. Elian felt dozens of eyes upon him, the collective weight of their scrutiny almost physical in its intensity. A group of children spotted Mira and rushed forward, surrounding her in a flurry of excited patterns and mental chatter. Among them was a female Lumini whose patterns mirrored Mira's in a way that left no doubt of their relationship. Mother and child embraced, their luminescence merging in joyful reunion. The atmosphere shifted as three elder Lumini approached, their patterns complex and measured. They stopped before Niara, ignoring Elian completely. "Warrior Niara," the central elder communicated, his mental voice resonating even in Elian's mind. "You return with the lost child, and a human." The last word carried layers of emotion, wariness, disdain, curiosity. "This is Elian Voss," Niara replied, her mental voice firm and clear. "He found Mira in the ruins after the earth-shaking. He protected her, cared for her, and vowed to return her home. He has honored that vow at great personal risk." The elder's patterns flickered in what Elian interpreted as skepticism. "The human will be questioned," the female elder to the right declared. "His intentions examined." "I will vouch for him," Niara said, stepping closer to Elian. "He has earned my trust." The pronouncement sent visible ripples of surprise through the gathered Lumini. Niara, warrior scout and daughter of a respected lineage, publicly aligning herself with a human was unprecedented. The central elder studied them both, his ancient eyes lingering on the barely visible traces of Niara's patterns that still marked Elian's skin at his wrist and neck, evidence of their intimate connection that any Lumini could read clearly. "So be it," the elder finally said. "He will be received in the chamber of truths. If his heart proves pure, he may depart in peace." As the crowd dispersed, Mira broke away from her mother and rushed to Elian, wrapping her arms around his legs. When she looked up at him, her mental impression was crystal clear. "Thank you for carrying me home." Elian knelt to her level. "You're welcome, little one." Mira's mother approached cautiously, her patterns expressing gratitude tempered with uncertainty. She extended her hand toward Elian, offering a formal connection. When he accepted, the exchange was brief but powerful, her profound thanks flowing into him along with lingering fear of what his presence might mean. Later, in a chamber carved from living crystal, Elian sat before the Council of Elders. The examination was unlike anything he had anticipated. Rather than questions, they requested direct contact, each elder placing their hands upon him, reading his intentions, his memories, his heart. The process was exhausting, leaving Elian drained but strangely unburdened, as if layers of himself had been gently peeled away to reveal his core truth. Throughout the ordeal, Niara remained at his side, her presence a constant comfort. When it was done, the central elder addressed them both. "Elian Voss speaks truth. His actions toward the child were born of compassion, not ulterior motive." The elder's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "More surprising is what we have discovered about his nature. He possesses unusual sensitivity to our energy, a compatibility rarely found even among our own kind." Niara's patterns brightened with vindication. "However," the elder continued, "the presence of any human in our settlement presents risk. The council must deliberate on what comes next." They were escorted to a dwelling prepared for them, a simple structure with walls of translucent crystal that filtered the light into soothing patterns. As night fell, the entire valley began to glow with intensified bioluminescence, bathing everything in soft, pulsing light. Alone together, Niara's reserve finally crumbled. She moved into Elian's arms, their connection immediate and profound. "What happens now?" he asked, holding her close. "If they ask me to leave, then I face a choice," she replied, her mental voice resonating with emotion. "My people are—" She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Their night together was both tender and desperate, each touch amplified by the uncertainty of their future. Through their connection, Elian sensed Niara's conflict, her duty to her people warring with what she had come to feel for him. Morning brought the council's decision. They would permit Elian to depart with his knowledge of their location, trusting in what they had seen in his heart. But they would not yet sanction open contact with the human settlements. The wounds of the breach were still too fresh. "And what of Niara?" Elian asked, standing before them with dignity despite the pain of impending separation. "What are your expectations of her?" "Niara's path is her own to choose," the female elder replied, surprising them both. "As has always been our way." Outside the council chamber, the settlement continued its daily rhythms. Children played among the crystal formations, their laughter a melody of mental impressions. Mira was among them, already reintegrated into the community that had mourned her. At the boundary of the settlement, Elian prepared for departure. He had been given supplies, including a small communications crystal attuned to Niara's energy signature, a way to maintain contact across distance. Niara stood before him, her patterns subdued, conflicted. "Your people need you," Elian said gently. "I understand that. And yours?" she asked. "What awaits you there?" Elian considered the colony, the life he'd built there. Work, purpose, but not belonging. Not anymore. He took her hands in his. "These past days have changed me, Niara. I've glimpsed something I never knew was possible." Her patterns shifted with emotion. "As have I." They stood in silence, the weight of decision heavy between them. "Perhaps," Elian finally said, "the bridge between our worlds doesn't need to be built all at once. Perhaps it begins with understanding, with connection, with two people who choose to carry each other's light." Niara's patterns brightened. She placed her hand against his chest, sending one last powerful impression, not words, but pure emotion, a promise. "I will return," Elian vowed. "Not as a colonist or a rescuer, but as myself. And we will find a way forward, together." As he turned to go, a small figure darted from the settlement. Mira ran to him, clutching something in her hands. She pressed it into his palm. A crystal unlike the others, one that pulsed with light that matched the patterns now permanently etched into his skin where Niara had touched him most deeply. "Remember," came Mira's impression, "home is who you carry." Elian knelt and embraced her one last time. "I won't forget." With the crystal warm against his heart and the promise of return sustaining him, Elian began the journey back. But even as he walked away from the valleys, he carried something with him that would never fade. The light of connection, the beginning of a bridge between worlds, and the knowledge that sometimes home was not a place at all, but the resonance between two hearts that had found each other across the stars.